Welcome to everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. For those of you who do not know me, I am Emma Molina. I am the Vice Chair of Rooted Santa Barbara County and the lead for programs and partnerships. Before we begin tonight, I have a couple housekeeping items. And if I mentioned it already, but just in case you just came in, if you do need or would like closed captioning, those are available via the closed captioning link at the bottom of your personal screen. This class, as I said, is being recorded and will be sent out to all registered attendees within a few days of the class. I usually send it out within about 48 to 72 hours afterwards. There will be a Q&A after Sharon's presentation, but please feel free to drop any and all questions that you may have in the chat box, and we will do our best to get to all of them. And finally, our class disclaimer. While nutrition is paramount to long-term health, this class is not intended to provide medical advice, guidance, or treatment. We are not providing medical advice, practicing medicine, or otherwise acting as anyone's physician in any capacity whatsoever. If you have any questions regarding specific conditions, treatments, or lifestyle changes, those should be discussed directly with your own healthcare team. All right, so now that that's out of the way, welcome again. So just a little background on us at Rooted. Here at Rooted, we are deeply focused on bringing more awareness to the power that food has on our long-term health and well-being. We offer these free monthly classes to the Santa Barbara County community and beyond, as you have all experienced so far. But much of the work that we actually do happens behind the scenes, working with partner organizations in the health, education, and food sectors. We are creating materials, developing curriculum and programming, as well as research-based initiatives and video resource library materials, training our community healthcare providers and workers, and so much more. And whilst we're still relatively new on the scene, having launched at the start of the COVID pandemic, but we have really big plans, and the response and support from our community has been awesome. But the cold hard facts are that no matter how much we as a society advance and how much technology takes over and how much we progress, we as a people are still getting sick, and chronic disease are still rampant amongst all people. So something's got to give, and we believe it's time to truly take a good hard look at the things we put in our mouths 3 times a day, at least. Me, probably 5 or 6 or 8 times a day. Tonight, we're going to do just that. So it is my absolute honor and pleasure to introduce our educator tonight. Sharon Palmer is a registered dietitian with more than 20 years of experience in the field of plant-based nutrition and sustainability. She also holds a Master's of Science in Sustainable Food Systems. Her love of nutrition and writing have resulted in the authoring of over 1,000 articles featured in a vast array of publications, including Better Homes and Gardens, Oprah Magazine, LA Times, and many, many more. In 2012, she published her first book, The Plant Powered Diet, The Lifelong Eating Plan for Achieving Optimal Health Beginning Today, and followed up 2 years later with The Plant Powered for Life, Eat Your Way to Lasting Health with 52 simple recipes, 52 simple steps, and 125 delicious recipes. And her third book, California Vegan, Inspiration and Recipes from the People and Places of the Golden State, actually was released earlier this year. And it's awesome and beautiful and stunning. She'll show it to you as well. And she's currently working on her 4th book, which will focus on the vast health benefits attributed to plant-based nutrition for the diabetes community. So I'm sure I missed many, many things in there, but I will leave that up to her to share more with you. And so without further ado, joining us tonight from her home in Ojai, it is my great pleasure to welcome Sharon Palmer. Sharon, welcome.
Hi, thanks for the beautiful introduction. And I'm so glad that I could be here tonight with you from my kitchen in Ojai. It's just been such a pleasure moving to this community and learning a little bit more about the local food community. And it's just so exciting to be surrounded by all the beautiful plant foods that I get to eat every day. So I'm just really happy to be here. I'm going to be talking a little bit about the health benefits of eating a plant-based diet, and then I'm going to get right into cooking 2 recipes. I think you have the links for the recipes. I don't know if we can drop them in the chat. For those that don't have them, you can find them at my site. I'm going to be making a ratatouille with white beans and a southwestern avocado, stuffed avocado. So I'll be making those in a little bit. But first, I want to talk a little bit about the health benefits of plant-based diets. And I want to welcome you to send questions. You can put them in the chat, and maybe Emma can read them out to me, because I've got my phone here in my kitchen, so it's going to be hard for me to access those. But
I absolutely will. I got you covered.
Yeah, so especially when I'm cooking, I might have some downtime, but please send me your questions. I want to have a lively conversation. But first of all, plant-based eating is so hot, but it's really been around a long time. Right now it's like super trendy, but this has been something that we've known about for a while. I actually studied nutrition at Loma Linda University, which is in a community that's now known as the Blue Zone. It was not a blue zone when I went to school there, but we learned plant-based nutrition. The community was plant-based. The university hospital was meat-free. It was completely zoned to be plant-based. And now we know it's a blue zone. If you haven't heard of the blue zones, check it out. They're locations around the world identified by Dan Buettner, in which people live the longest, the greatest concentration of centenarians, people who live 100 years or more. And so in California, Loma Linda is the one in the US. There's also one in Costa Rica, Greece, Italy, Japan. But it was a really interesting finding, because diet was a really big factor. When Dan Buettner was studying these populations, he found that they all ate a plant-based diet. It was different types of plant-based diets. In Loma Linda, it was very plant-based, but in other countries, it was mostly plant-based. But there were other factors too. They exercised, they had a lot of social support in their community. But over the last 3 decades, we're learning more and more about the benefits of eating plant-based diets. And I see that as a spectrum of diets. So when you have vegan diet is 100% plant-based, but we have vegetarian, which is allowing for dairy and eggs. And then we have pescatarian, which allows for fish. And then we have flexitarian, which is this semi-vegetarian diet, which is, I think more and more people are interested in this, where they may not want to give up animal foods completely, but they want to start eating mostly plant-based. And that's really exciting. Research has shown that about 50% of people are trying to eat more plant-based. So I always encourage people to just get on that bandwagon and find what's right for you and start eating more whole plant foods, because they are linked with multiple health benefits. So eating a more plant-based diet has been linked with all sorts of benefits. So when we look at our diseases of modern times, the chronic disease killers, like heart disease is the #1 killer. And of course, a plant-based diet is linked with lots of benefits for the heart. It can protect the heart through reducing inflammation and oxidative stress, by reducing cholesterol levels, by creating healthier vessels. So there are a lot of heart benefits, but also there's a reduced risk of cancers, diabetes, obesity, and neurodegenerative diseases, many benefits associated with this diet. So why would there be benefits for eating a more plant-based diet? Well, there are a lot of reasons why. First of all, it's all the good stuff that you find in plant foods. So when you're looking at this beautiful, I hope you can see all my beautiful things that I've gotten here, and you're going to be cooking with them, and I'll be cooking with them in a bit. But when you're looking at all these beautiful whole plant foods, you're getting fiber. Now, fiber is only found in the plant world, and it's so beneficial in many ways: the heart, the gut, the immune system. You're also getting phytochemicals. Again, these are these plant compounds that are found in plants, typically on the outer surface of the plant. They give plants the bright color. These act as anti-inflammatory compounds, and they're also antioxidant compounds. So they reduce inflammation in the body, which we know is a root of chronic disease. So phytochemicals are only found in the plant world. Also, healthy fats. We're working with avocados today. This is an example of a healthy fat. Again, the healthy fats are in the plant world, and then all the vitamins and minerals in there. So the symphony of nutrients, that is why a plant-based diet is linked with health benefits. we're also avoiding some of the negative things that are found in a high animal food diet, things like cholesterol, saturated fat, and some of these compounds that are produced in the processing of meat, things like nitroso compounds. They are linked with negative health benefits, in fact, negative health effects. In fact, now the recommendation is to avoid processed meats, things like bacon and sausage and ham. Many organizations are just saying avoid it, and reducing red meat intake, trying to eat more of these plant-based foods. And then, of course, one of the main benefits of eating a more plant-based diet is it's good for the environment. So you have something that's good for us and it's good for the environment. This is very consistent in the research that shows that eating a more plant-based diet can reduce your carbon footprint. It could be more powerful than the car we drive. Our diet choices every day, when we look at a high input diet versus a low input diet, and we know that a high animal food diet has a greater impact in many ways. It takes up more land, it takes up more water, it takes animal food, it produces manure and air pollution. So one of the big recommendations right now is that Western countries should be reducing their meat intake by 50% for human health and the planet. So even if we just try to start eating more of these plant-based meals, we can make a difference both in our own health and the planet's health. So how do we eat a more plant-based diet? Well, first of all, I like to look at all the beautiful foods that we get to eat. So when you're eating plant-based, you want to have plant proteins. That could be something like pulses, which is beans and lentils and dried peas. It can also be soy foods like tofu or tempeh, nuts or seeds. And then we also want to be eating more whole grains, things like brown rice or quinoa, sorghum, millet. Those should be part of our diet. And then, of course, this foundation of fruits and vegetables. This is a big part of a healthy plant-based diet. Lots of fruits and vegetables. I recommend 6 servings of veggies a day and 3 servings of fruit a day. And then healthy fats, we're talking about avocado, olives, nuts and seeds. This is really the foundation of a healthy plant-based diet. So I wanted to share a few of my tips if you're trying to give plant-based eating a try, how you could get started. So first of all, one of the things that we've seen about traditional diets around the world, we call them indigenous diets. This is where people have been eating the same way since the beginning of time because they haven't been modernized. So when Dan Buettner was looking at these centenarian pockets around the world, the blue zones, a lot of these were traditional diets, and these tend to be more plant-based. And if they use meat, they might just use a tiny bit as a seasoning. So for example, you'll see in parts of Asia, you see these beautiful stir fries with just a little bit of animal protein. For the whole family, you're making a big recipe with lots of vegetables, a whole grain, a healthy fat, and then just a small amount of animal protein. So that's one way you can eat more plant-based is, getting away from the center of the plate where you have to have the large serving of animal protein. Another tip that I like to suggest is to try Meatless Monday. If you haven't tried it yet, go check it out at their website. But it's this idea of just going one day a week completely plant-based. And why not Monday? Because research shows we have our best behaviors on Mondays. So, going plant-based one day a week, and then you can, try from there to see if you want to add more days of going plant-based. You'll realize it's kind of fun and it's not that difficult. So just add more days after that. Another tip that I have is to look at your favorite family recipes. So for example, we love tacos in our house. So those are easy to make plant-based. I like to use black beans. I've got my black beans here. And then just all the veggies. And then our family makes them the way they like it. I just put all the toppings out there and people make their own tacos. I also make a mean veggie lasagna, and you can find that recipe on my blog. I also wanted to share, I know we've got a little glimpse of my book in our introduction, but this is my book, California Vegan. I have a lot of my recipes in here too. And this is really based on, the California lifestyle. We have a wonderful history of plant-based eating in California. So I encourage you to check that out, California Vegan. But you can also get some of my lasagna recipes on my site. But that's a really great way, something that's approachable, something that people are familiar with. Try to make a plant-based version of these classic dishes. And then another one of my tip is to look at the global food cuisines around you, because they have beautiful plant-based foods, and many global diets, whether you're talking about Indian food, those beautiful dals and the grains and the breads and the salads, really beautiful plant-based food. So get inspiration from other global cuisines. And then another thing I like to recommend is to stock your pantry, because one thing about healthy eating, if you come home at the end of the day and you're hungry, if there's nothing in your house to eat, there's no healthy food, you're not going to be eating healthy. So keeping your pantry stocked, because a lot of plant-based foods are shelf stable. So we're talking about canned beans or dried beans. You can have it in your pantry. All of those whole grains, shelf stable. Nuts and seeds, you can store them in your pantry. And then you're just supplementing it with those fresh veggies and fruits. So having those healthy foods on hand will really make it much more likely that you're going to be cooking some of this healthy food. And then I mentioned already, I recommend 6 servings of veggies a day. And that's really going to flood your body with all those compounds that are good for disease reduction. So that's a goal. I know there are many Americans, most Americans, only 9% of Americans actually meet their veggie requirement. So this is a big goal, but if people can start working for that, even veggies for breakfast, it's snack time. A lot of people aren't eating their first vegetable until dinner time, and that's too late. You need to be having those nutrients in your body all day long. So, and then this idea of 3 fruits a day, I like to say fruit is your natural dessert. So instead of having a sweet treat, why not have fruit as that treat? And when we look at the beautiful fruits that we have available, and with the seasons, now we're starting to get our pears and our apples and our persimmons and pomegranates are coming. So switching with the seasons and having those beautiful fruits for dessert is a really great way to pack in those nutrients. And then I also give a shout out for pulses. I mentioned them a couple of times, but pulses are these beans, lentils, and peas. And these are the most sustainable protein choice you can find. They're sustainable in so many ways. They're economical. They're the cheapest protein source. And they're good for the environment. They grow in places that don't need a lot of water. They make their own fertilizer because they are capable of capturing nitrogen and depositing it in the soil. So it's really, the most sustainable protein that's also linked with so many benefits. If you eat beans more regularly, beans, lentils, and peas, you have a lower risk of all these diseases. So try to have a few servings a week. I actually encourage every single day to have pulses, but if you're not familiar with them, try at least a few times a week. And that can be the star of your plate. That's your protein source for that meal. Another suggestion is to skip all those refined foods. Of course, a diet can't be 100% pure. We have to have our treats, but to really think twice about filling our diets with these refined foods, things like things made of white flour, refined grains, lots of sugars added to them, trying to limit those foods and focus on all of these whole foods that we're cooking with today. So we call it the Western diet, the way we eat in America, and it is actually a diet that's been characterized by researchers. It's the way we eat in developed nations like America, and in Europe, they eat a Western diet in many of the countries as well. This diet has been linked with all sorts of health problems. It's the typical industrialized diet, fast food, high meat, white flour, very few fruits and vegetables, no whole grains, no beans. It's a very sad diet. In fact, people call it the sad diet, the standard American diet. And this diet, has been linked with all of these health impacts that are negative. But yet a healthy diet can reduce your risk of chronic diseases by 80%. So think about it, 80%. Research has shown that if you're eating a healthy diet with a healthy lifestyle, exercise every day, you're not smoking, you can reduce your risk of things like heart disease, cancer, diabetes by 80%. And there's no pill that will do that. It's this healthy lifestyle that can really make an impact. So moving away from that Western diet to more healthy plant-based diet is really the way to go. So I am going to start cooking, and I'd love to hear your questions and your suggestions and your tips. And everything while I cook. And I will address those, as we go, but I want to get cooking because we're going to start with ratatouille. And I've got my hot plate here going. I'm going to add a little bit of olive oil. Olive oil is my number one cooking oil in my kitchen. You don't need a lot, but it is the healthiest of the cooking oils, especially when you're using extra virgin like I do. I recommend extra virgin even for cooking because it has some of those compounds in it still, some of those antioxidant compounds. So I'm just going to heat up a little olive oil in my pan, and I'm going to add my onions. I've got one chopped sliced onion. This is for my ratatouille. And I'm going to let that saute. And then I want to slice up my other veggies. I always pre-slice my onion because it makes me cry. And when you're doing a cooking demo, you don't want to be crying while you're cooking. So I also am going to chop up 3 garlics. And that's going to go in there too. Move this out of my way. So, I love the fact that this recipe is a Mediterranean recipe. It comes from France, the south of France. And when you think about the Mediterranean diet, it's actually a very plant-based diet. In fact, it's considered a plant-based diet because the main animal protein is fish. It's not very much fish. It's mostly things like what we're cooking today: beans, grains, lentils, lots of fruits and vegetables, healthy fats. So that's why there's so much research on benefits of the Mediterranean diet. So a lot of my plant-based dishes are really based on the Mediterranean diet. I've had a chance to spend a lot of time in the Mediterranean, studying the different diet patterns in the different regions. And you will literally go to many countries and you will see, rarely see an animal food. You'll just see all of these beautiful salads and bean dishes and grain dishes, and of course, all the seasonal vegetables. And we actually live in a Mediterranean climate here in California. So we actually have some of the same foods that are classic parts of Mediterranean diet. So the classic parts, olives is one. We can grow olives here. Grains, we can grow grains here. And then grapes. Those are the 3, they call it the Mediterranean triad. But there are other parts of the Mediterranean. Lots of produce is a key part of the Mediterranean diet. And some of the things we've got like eggplant and zucchini. These came from my garden. This time of year, we're just at the end of summer, starting fall, so we might as well take advantage of these things before they go out of season. And they're still available right now. So eggplant and zucchini are part of that dish, which is a very Mediterranean. So basically, I'm going to be slicing my eggplant and just into little circles here. This is a very simple, rustic recipe. It's not fancy. I'm not doing anything fancy. I'm just sauteing my vegetables with a little olive oil. So this is something literally you could make for dinner. I'm telling you, and you're going to see 10, 15 minutes, because we're basically sauteing these vegetables, and then we're going to add some canned tomatoes and canned white beans. Now, classic ratatouille doesn't traditionally have the beans. I did it as a variation because I wanted to make this like a one-dish meal. So that means it's got the protein, that would be lacking from this recipe. And then what I like to do is serve it with pasta. So then I've got like a real balanced meal, for the whole family. So this is when your garden is full of zucchini and you're not knowing what to do with it. This is one of those recipes that I love to use, as well as the eggplant. So I'm just going to slice this and saute it with the onions. We're getting some nice color here. You can use a white onion. I had a red onion on hand. And the summer squash for this recipe, you could easily use a different color of summer squash. I'm gonna switch. My knife needs to be sharpened. So you can use, different types of summer squash here. You can use yellow or silver or the different types, the different colors. Sometimes they're modeled with different colors. Just use what you have on hand. One of the trademarks of the Mediterranean diet is that it was called poor man's food. So, the rest of Europe was looking down on the Mediterranean, thinking, oh, they're not refined. They're eating beans and vegetables and whole grains. But yet, Ansel Keys found in the mid-century that in his research that in Greece, they were living the longest because of the Mediterranean diet, because they were eating the kinds of foods that we're showing you today. So this kind of diet pattern is actually linked with multiple health benefits. And it's just simple, it's affordable, it's rustic, but it's just delicious and satisfying. So I'm gonna chop up my zucchini too. So basically, a small eggplant, small zucchini. This one's a little on the bigger side. It doesn't have to be exact. That's the beauty of these kind of traditional dishes. So we're just gonna slice that up. And it just basically is gonna saute till everything's nice and tender and thickened. Now this recipe, I think I mentioned, comes from the south of France originally. And it's one thing that is really easy to make. It's just delicious. The leftovers are amazing too. You just heat them up. It's great for meal prep. It's just something I make all summer long, especially because it has tomatoes too. And sometimes my garden is just brimming with tomatoes and I need to find ways to use up my tomatoes. So this is a great recipe for that as well.
Sharon, we have a couple questions.
Sure.
So, I mean, I answered one of these, but somebody is asking, they don't use oil and is veggie broth okay? Which I said, of course,
Yeah.
water or veggie broth sauteing is great. Yeah. I thought you'd agree.
Yes.
And Cheryl's asking, are you on low heat, high heat? Where are you at there with your heat?
It's over medium heat. So that's heat. What we do. And I'm just going to saute it, as it's cooking, just kind of saute it a little bit here and there. And basically what you're going to do is saute this for about 10 minutes. But I'm going to also add some of my other ingredients here. So you can see what I got going on here. Yeah, so if you're not using oils, you could definitely skip that and use a little veggie broth. In fact, a lot of times when I'm sauteing, rather than just keep adding oil, I just start out with a little oil and then I might add a little water, even something right here to reduce the amount of oil you're using. And this is actually a Mediterranean trick, is to add a little water with the oil. So you're not sticking to the bottom of the pan and you're not just glunking on that oil. We don't, a little bit of oil is enough to provide that benefit. You don't have to just pile it on. A lot of people think the Mediterranean diet is just oil, adding olive oil. But it's not. It's the quality of ingredients plus a small amount of healthy fat.
And then we had one other question of, could you use frozen veggies?
You certainly could. That's a great question. I'm all about ways to change recipes up for the seasons. So this is a great recipe all summer long. Now we're getting into fall. But then what if these ingredients aren't available? I would much rather you use frozen or canned rather than, buying things that are shipped in from many countries, way thousands of miles away, which is really bad for your food miles, your environmental footprint. So it's better to switch to preserved foods when they're out of season, things like canned, frozen. So you would just need to cut down your cooking time, because you don't need to overcook it, So definitely switch to frozen in the off season. So the other thing this recipe calls for is oregano. I have fresh oregano in my garden. I don't know how many of you are growing herbs, but in California, I mean, if you have a little bit of place to grow herbs, please do, because they're so easy. This oregano I've had growing for 3 years. It takes very little water. Again, this is a Mediterranean herb. We have the same climate. It basically requires no water, and it just grows like crazy. It becomes like a carpet. So I use fresh herbs, all year long. I can dry this and preserve it. It grows all year long. So if you have the place, try to grow some herbs. They're very satisfying because, you can pull to these amazing aromatic spices and herbs, which are, herbs and spices are good for our health. They're packed with anti-inflammatory compounds. So be generous with herbs and spices in your cooking. Just use lots of them. It adds flavor. You don't need to use as much salt. So I'm going to add some of my oregano here. Even if you just have room for a pot, you can have a pot of herbs by your doorstep, your window. It's just a fun thing to try. Now you could totally use dried oregano for this, but since I have it growing in my garden, I'm gonna add some fresh. And oregano is a very Mediterranean herb. So I just pinched off my oregano in here. The other thing I'm gonna add is my olives. I'm using Kalamata olives, but you could use different types of olives. And then I'm gonna be adding a can of diced tomatoes. Now, in the summertime, when I have lots of tomatoes on hand, I will use fresh. So 1 can of tomatoes is equivalent to about 1 3/4 cup fresh chopped tomatoes. And then I'm gonna be adding a can of white beans. So you can use whatever type of white bean you want, but white beans are common in the Mediterranean, so they kind of pair nicely with this recipe. And that's really it. We're just gonna let this go. And then at the very end, I'm gonna top it with a little bit of pine nuts. So I'm gonna go ahead and add my olives here. You know, traditionally when I'm cooking this recipe, I would wait until this veggies get quite soft, you know, before I add my other ingredients. But I'm gonna speed ahead a little bit. I'm gonna add my 1/2 cup of olives, and I just like to leave them whole. And in the Mediterranean, you see them whole in dishes. They're not sliced all the time. So I just like them whole. And then I've got my can of diced tomatoes. And then I've got my can of white beans. Now I rinsed these. So I like to rinse out the kind of that thickened liquid. And so I rinsed and drained those. You can also reduce the salt by doing that. Now this recipe, I feel like does not need salt because the olives are adding some salt. The tomatoes have salt in them. The beans have salt. And I really encourage you to try not to salt your food, you know, right away, because Americans are getting too much salt. It's linked with high blood pressure and stroke. So eating less salt is a healthy thing. And when you're eating this beautiful plant-based diet, you don't need a lot of salt. I encourage you to taste the flavors of food the way nature made them, you know, and just don't add the salt in cooking and then taste it. And you'd be surprised how many times it's like, that doesn't need salt. And studies show that you can get used to less salt in your cooking. So start a challenge and don't add salt to your cooking. Taste it and see if you like it. If you do want to add a little salt, sometimes just adding it at the end, like actually dusting it, just a little pinch at the end on the top of your foods gives you a bigger bang for your buck when it comes to sodium, reducing the amount of salt you need. So basically, this is really it. I'm gonna just let this bubble a little bit on the side, just stirring it here, and then I'm gonna reduce the heat and just let this kind of simmer until everything is like nice and thickened and moist and just, you know, yummy and delicious. But see how easy this is. You could serve this with a side salad. As I said, you could serve it with pasta, kind of just dump it like a sauce. You could just toast some rustic whole grain bread with this. There's just a lot you could do with this. It's good the next day. It's really good as a leftover. So I'm gonna just let this simmer. I am gonna add a little black pepper though, just a little bit to balance out those flavors. This is also a very budget-friendly recipe. Think about how economical something like this is, you know, using seasonal produce. So we're gonna let this simmer on the side, and I'm gonna finish it with the pine nuts and after it's done cooking. Now I wanted to move forward and do the Southwestern stuffed avocado recipe.
Sharon, before we move on, with just one question in here. Laura has asked, how do you get the bitterness of eggplant out without salt? I thought heat and salt allowed the bitterness to reduce.
You know, you will see a lot of recipes with eggplant where they salt it and let it sit and kind of pull out the moisture. And of course you can do that, but you know, I find that step is not really necessary. I've been cooking with eggplant for years, and you'll see a lot of more rustic recipes that just completely eliminate that step. So I encourage you to try this, and you'll see I don't find the eggplant to be bitter at all. In fact, I have an eggplant parm recipe that's a vegan eggplant parm recipe. I just made it a couple of weeks ago. I made it so many times. I put it on the table at a party. Nobody knew it was 100% plant-based. Everybody ate it all. Did not salt and soak the eggplant on the side, just sliced it and cooked it on up. I roasted it in the oven. And then layered it with cashew cheese that I had made, and super easy. So, you know, there are a lot of traditional recipes where you'll see that they require you to soak it and, you know, to add the salt and set it to the side. And one of the other reasons they do that is to reduce the liquid, because there's a lot of liquid in eggplant. You'll see even zucchini recipes that they do that. But I just skip that step, trying to reduce sodium and make it easier for people. It's a great question. So if anybody has any other questions, let me know. I'm going to move on to the next recipe. I can always answer them while I'm cooking. So this recipe features avocados. It's just a really simple appetizer or salad recipe. I think it's beautiful. And, you know, we live in the area where avocados come from. You know, we have so many beautiful avocados in my neighborhood. I have avocados all around me. I have avocados in my garden. And so it's always fun to put to use these seasonal local ingredients that we have. So I've got some gorgeous, look at the size of these avocados. I got these at the farmer's market this week, but it's just a fun way to use avocados, which are, you know, they're in season most of the year. We have some type of avocado that's in season here. And it's really this beautiful kind of a salad that you can serve. I love to serve it if you're having a more elegant meal, like the first course where you just plate it and put it out. It looks so pretty, or you can just serve it with your family as an appetizer, as a salad course. So it's really easy. I'm just going to mix up first I'm going to mix up the actual filling part, which is the Southwestern flavor profile. So we're moving from the Mediterranean to more Latin American Southwestern flavor profile. So we're looking at those blue zones because Costa Rica was one of the blue zones, and they have that more beautiful, vibrant Latin American food culture. So we're going to start by adding our frozen corn. I'm going to just add it to my bowl. Now you could use fresh corn in the season, you know, just shuck it, cook it and shuck it. It's really great if you've got grilled corn, but I'm using frozen. It could be canned corn too. And the thing that's kind of cool is all the ingredients in this recipe really do come from Latin America. So corn comes from Latin America. I've got black beans. These come from the region as well. I'm going to add about half a cup of black beans. These were canned. You could start from scratch. For the ratatouille, you could use scratch white beans too. You can soak your white beans overnight, cook them, and add them to this recipe as well. So I'm going to increase that temperature a little bit. So I've got my black beans in here, and I've got 1/4 cup of chopped red onion. Kind of finely dice that. I've got a few tablespoons of chopped cilantro. This is all part of that beautiful Latin American diet. And I'm going to slice up 1 tomato here. I'm going to just dice that up. So we're just dicing it. You could use canned tomatoes in this recipe when they're not in season, but I still have a few tomatoes growing in my garden. I don't know if all of you out there who have a garden, if you've got any tomatoes left. I just have a few left and I'm about ready to give up on them. Then I'm switching to the more fall, winter profile of tomatoes. So this would be a nice one, you know, whenever tomatoes are available. Again, you can switch to those canned tomatoes when they're not available. So I'm just going to dice it, and it's kind of like a salsa topping that we're making. So I'm dicing that. You can get this recipe on my website too at sharonpalmer.com.
I've linked it in the chat as well, but I will link it again as we're going on as well.
Yeah. So I'm also going to put some garlic in here. Now you could always switch up these ingredients, you know. This is the flavor profile that I like, but you know, you can think about what you have on hand. You could use different color tomatoes, for example. Some of the tomatoes that do the best in my garden are the yellow ones, the yellow and the orange ones. For some reason, they always grow the best, and they're so sweet. So, you know, you can use another ingredient. I don't have bell pepper in here, but you could add bell pepper. I think that might be a fun ingredient too. But we're just making this topping that's going to go over those avocados. And this would be something, you know, I also think this would be really nice just served with whole grain toast or something, kind of that avocado toast idea too. Maybe this could be served with a hearty soup, you know, like a lentil soup or something where we've got the protein. But I just wanted to show you different ways that you can think about eating more plant-based. And these recipes, you know, feature a lot of fruits and vegetables, your pulses, but you can also turn to other types of proteins to eat more plant-based, such as tofu, tempeh, which are soy foods. Those are healthy plant proteins as well. I'm going to add one clove of garlic actually, one clove of garlic. And then this recipe doesn't call for jalapeno, but I'm going to add one because my jalapeno plant was just going crazy in my garden. And again, I just want to show you how you can always switch up your recipes if you feel like it. You don't have to just stick to recipes, you know, like they're the law. You can mix them up, you can substitute, unless it's something really picky, you know, like a baked thing. I always encourage people to try substitutions. Use what you have on hand. You can save money. You can be more sustainable by using up things that you have on hand. So hence my jalapeno, that I have one jalapeno bush that has been prolific. And if you're in Southern California, I encourage you to try to grow one chili plant. It can just keep you in business for months. And it's just a really vibrant thing to add to your cooking. There is research that shows spicy foods like chili peppers are good for us. They have a lot of antioxidant compounds. And where we're talking about these phytochemicals that Mother Nature put in all these plants, they give plants the color, they give plants the spice, they give them the aromas. So when we're talking about, like, for example, rosemary has phytochemicals that give it that beautiful piney herbal aroma that research shows is reduces stress. You know, same thing with lavender, you know. So nature has developed these phytochemicals in the plants, and sometimes they're the color, sometimes they're the flavor, sometimes they're the aroma. So, you know, the whole bottom line is to make your cooking vibrant with color, flavor, textures. And that's really the beauty of a plant-based diet, is all of the color that we're combining, you know, that's all coming from plants. So really getting in more diversity of plant foods in your diet is a great idea. Now I'm gonna juice a lemon. It calls for half of a lemon. These are from my tree and they're the last of the season. So I'm gonna go ahead and juice it. I don't know if you have one of these juicers, but this is one of my favorite things. It's a really easy way to add lemon juice. You just pop half of a lemon juice in there, lemon in there, and juice it. Super easy, doesn't take up a lot of room. It's not expensive. And lemon is a great thing to be using in your cooking because it can reduce salt in your cooking. It adds that brightness. It adds a little bit of vitamin C. So I use lemon juice a lot in my cooking. I also am going to use a touch of cumin. And you could add some salt. I'm not going to add salt this time because I'm really trying to encourage people to try that beautiful food without adding the salt. So you can see it's super colorful. It's like this beautiful kind of a salsa with corn and black beans. We've got our tomato in there, our cilantro, and it's just going to create this beautiful vegetable mixture that's going to go over our avocado. So I'm going to put this to the side. And I'll show you what I'm going to do, because basically what I like to do with this is line a salad plate or a serving plate with lettuce leaves to serve this. If I'm going to be serving this as a pretty start or an appetizer or a salad, I like to line a serving dish with some lettuce leaves. And then what I'm going to do is slice open my avocado. Now, one thing you can do with your avocado is, this is an easy recipe because we're not removing it from the shell. So we're just cutting it in half. So this is a really easy recipe. You don't have to worry about slicing it. But one tip for slicing your avocados, you've probably seen this, is to, rather than peel it and slice it, is you can just score it with a knife, and you can even slice it this way. And then you can take a spoon and just lift it out of the shell, which can really make slicing avocados a lot easier. So I'm just gonna arrange this over the lettuce. I've got this on the side here. And then you just want to scoop this beautiful mixture right on top. And what I like to do is just let it just heap over the top, just let it spill over the top. It's just like a beautiful kind of abandonment of all these ingredients. You could garnish it with a little of that cilantro, and that's it. So basically, you know, people can just eat this with a knife and fork and just have this gorgeous topping, and it's a beautiful side. You can put this on a platter and people can take their own. Now, these are big avocados. I would normally serve the smaller ones, especially if this is an individual salad or serving for somebody. So that's all set. And this is looking really lovely. Now you can decide when you're gonna have your ratatouille all done here. You can decide when it's soft and tender enough. You can cook it a long time where it gets really soupy. If you like your veggies a little bit more on the crisp side, then you could stop cooking it right now, because my eggplants are nice and cooked. My zucchini's got a nice bright green color, but there's still a little texture there. Traditionally, ratatouille is cooked until it's quite soft, but you can make that decision. I just want to show you what it looks like here. And then we're just going to garnish it with some pine nuts. We're adding a little extra protein, some more healthy fats, a little crunch. So that's what it looks like. There we go. So we have 2 recipes done really quickly. So it just showcases how easy you can get a healthy plant-based meal on the table. And I'm going to be cooking some pasta for dinner tonight to go with this. So I'd love to hear your thoughts. If you have any questions or any tips or suggestions about the recipes, please fire away.
That was awesome, Sharon. Thank you so much. Those all look so easy, and I love how quick you made that. I always have everything prepped beforehand, and you just made it like so easy. We have people in the chat box giving suggestions. So somebody asked earlier, what would you serve the ratatouille with? Would you have it just like that, or might you put it on rice? Or even somebody else said that'd be great on a tortilla. I think that was for the avocado.
Yeah, idea for the avocado. Great idea. That would be beautiful. My favorite thing to do with this, I already mentioned, is to, when I'm having people over and I'm taking a little extra caution, although do you see how easy this is? I love to just serve this on individual salad plates. I get the smallest avocados I can find, and then I just make each person one so they have a special kind of a start for a meal. But I love that idea of serving this with like whole grain tortillas or corn tortillas, just nice and warm. And then you could kind of dig into this and put, oh my gosh, that would be amazing. So as far as the ratatouille goes, I most often just have this as a side dish. I love it as a side dish. If you leave out the beans, it's more of a traditional ratatouille. So it would be a veggie side dish. But with the beans, now you've added the plant protein. So you're getting close to a balanced meal. The only thing you're missing is your starch, your grain component. So what I was mentioning, that I am planning on cooking pasta, and then I just pile this like a pasta sauce over the pasta. Or like some really good whole grain bread, just sliced and toasted on the side, and then maybe add a salad if you want to add one more element. You don't have to, because this is rich in veggies, but if you're wanting to add one more element, and this is really good, you know, the leftovers too. But, you know, you could put this on a sandwich, you could put it on a pizza, you know, there's so much you could do with something like ratatouille. So I think really the sky is a limit. You know, you could try different beans here. I've got the white beans. You could try lentils, you know, you could use a different color bean. So, you know, I'm trying to stick with that more Mediterranean profile here. Lentils would fit in that profile as well. So there's lots of different things you could do with that.
Sharon, we have one question that came up earlier, and I just wanted to address it. So there was a person who they have issues with beans and you know, sort of more kind of digestive issues with beans.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about that? We've talked about that in many classes, but I'd love to hear your take on it.
Such a great question. I have a blog on that too, about, you know, what people can do when they have gastrointestinal issues with beans. It's a very common question I get. So beans do have a lot of fiber. They're so packed in fiber, which is one reason why people will get gastrointestinal symptoms like gas or bloating. So sadly, Americans eat a dismal amount of fiber, like just, such a tiny amount of fiber. So a lot of us are not used to eating these fiber-rich foods. And when we do, we get all sorts of symptoms. So whenever I'm working with somebody who's starting to eat more healthy, more plant-based, and they're going from that Western diet we talked about to what we're eating here, a lot of times they will get these gastrointestinal symptoms. So one of the things I like to talk about is going slow. If you're really switching from a Western diet to a more healthful diet, go slow with the pulses and the beans. Start out with once a week and see how that goes. And when you have them, make sure you're not having that on top of like whole grains and on top of like Brussels sprouts. You're not loading everything up in one meal. But when you start getting used to eating more fiber, you'll find that it doesn't bother you. And research shows you can get used to the amount of fiber. So, the average American is eating less than 15 grams of fiber a day. We should be eating at least 25. I'm eating sometimes like 50, 60, 70 grams of fiber a day. You get used to it, and it's good for you to have that much fiber. So there are other things you can do also. For example, when you're cooking beans, you want to make sure you soak them well and you cook them well. You throw away your soaking water, start with clean water, and cook them really well. That can reduce all these compounds that can make you have gas. You can also sprout your beans first. That can also reduce some of those gas forming compounds. So you can sprout beans. You can buy them already sprouted too, and that can also help. And drink lots of water too. When you're starting to increase fiber in your diet, you need to be drinking water because fiber absorbs water in your gut. So you don't want it to turn into cement. You want it to turn into this fluffy fiber in your gut, and it needs to absorb that water.
There was one question, any other nut recommendation other than pine nuts on the ratatouille?
You could use any nut you want. I tried to kind of pair with the Mediterranean profile, but and actually nuts you may not really see on a traditional ratatouille. I kind of added that, but walnuts you'll see in Mediterranean food. I think walnuts would be beautiful. Chopped walnuts in here. Almonds is another thing you see in the Mediterranean, chopped almonds. And it just kind of gives things a nice little crunch, a little extra dose of healthy fats and some protein and just that nice texture. You could also add a little more oregano here too. I would definitely add more oregano even at the finishing. I like to cook with some of the herbs and then finish it with some of the fresh herbs as well.
Carol gave a great tip, which I agree with, is that when cooking beans from scratch, make sure you don't add salt until they're actually soft and really cooked to your taste, because that also can retain some of the those compounds which are more gas producing. Also, another little tip is you can take like an inch of kombu seaweed and put that in the pot while you're cooking the beans, and that also helps reduce the phytic acid that's produced. Jennifer,
I agree with
Jennifer, also, any tips for veggies for diabetics? Any and all?
for diabetics, I'm sorry, what was that?
Any tips for veggies for diabetics?
Oh yes, I'm working, I think we mentioned I'm working on my next book. It's about to be published on plant-based eating for diabetes. And in the last 10 years, there's been a lot of research showing that plant-based diets, like vegetarian diets, vegan diets, or just even getting more of that direction, are very good for reducing your risk of diabetes. So for example, if you have family history of diabetes, you're prone to diabetes, you're going to the doctor and your glucose is high, just teasing to be high, and you know that you're at risk, it's good for preventing it to happen. It's also good for managing diabetes, all different types, from type 1 to insulin dependent to type 2, even gestational diabetes. So now the research has been showing that it's really good. And there's lots of reasons why. One is those phytochemicals that we're talking about, because diabetes is very inflammatory, the disease condition. So reducing inflammation is very important. It's also, all the fiber is really good for diabetes, a high fiber diet, because fiber delays the absorption of glucose into the bloodstream. So by having more fiber, you're getting these really gentle curves of your glucose rather than these peaks and valleys. So there are so many reasons why it's good. So some of the, some of the superstars that we're talking about are recommended for a diabetes diet. Things like beans, whole grains, lots of vegetables, especially these low carbohydrate vegetables, fruits as your dessert. These are all things that are, it's really wonderful in the nutrition world when we find out what's good for your heart. It's also good for your diet, reducing diabetes. It's also good for your brain. It's good for everything, really. So, but there are some interesting vegetables that have been turned out to be could be beneficial for diabetes. One is bitter melon. I don't know if you've heard of that. It's traditional in Indian cooking and certain Asian cooking traditions. And it has compounds that seem to be good for diabetes. Also, like some of the cactus, the edible cactus that's part of the traditional Latin American diet has some diabetes protection. Spices, even cinnamon has had some research on diabetes. So there's some particular foods that are good, but I just recommend that, you should be getting a ton of vegetables, servings of fruit, having your whole grains rather than the refined grains, and the plant proteins too.
Great. Somebody asked, is it helpful to add baking soda when cooking beans from scratch? If so, at which point is it added? And how much?
You guys are smart out there. You know all this. Yes. Baking soda is another thing you can add, and it will, soften. It makes them more digestible. I add it at the beginning. It also shortens your cooking time. So the seaweed, the baking soda are things you can do. But one thing, somebody talked about salt. The other thing you should watch out for when you're cooking beans from scratch is to avoid your acid till the end. So if you, for example, tomatoes are acid, it will delay the cooking time. It reduces the digestibility. So add it at the very end. If you're making chili, add the tomatoes after the beans are softened. So if you're adding lemon juice, add it at the end. Anything that's acidic. So I usually, when I'm cooking my beans, I get my beans going first. I may add some of my seasonings, my onion, my garlic, because I really like those to meld and to really cook and meld into the flavor. But then maybe after the beans are really soft, then I start adding my extra ingredients. If I'm adding some celery or some carrots or tomatoes or whatever, I'm adding that more towards the end when the beans are soft. And I wanted to also encourage you to check out heirloom beans. I don't know if people can say if they've tried them, but heirloom beans are just like heirloom tomatoes. I have my heirloom tomato around here somewhere. But they're the plant foods that farmers, when farmers were producing their crops, they would see one plant or one row that would just do really well, and it had some characteristic, beautiful color, or it tasted amazing, whatever. And they would save those seeds and plant them, and they became heirlooms. So that's what the story of heirloom produce is. That's why we have so many heirloom tomatoes with all the beautiful colors. So there's the same thing in lots of vegetables where farmers found these unusual varieties that they would cherish the seeds and replant them. And so we have beans like that too. There are so many varieties of beans. There are beans called orca beans that look like little orca whales. There's an eye of the goat bean that looks like goat's eyes. There's like flageolet beans that are like a mint green. They're from France. So many types of beans. So, don't limit yourself only to the ones you can find, easily. You can also look for these different types of beans at farmers markets. You can buy them online at different natural food stores. You can grow them really easily at home too.
This is wonderful, Sharon. Thank you so much. Do we have there's probably some questions I did not get to. So if I didn't get to your question, please unmute yourself and you can take it off. I love Chris's comment. Yes, so many different types of plant foods. It's exciting. Never the same meal twice.
Yeah.
And, one person, there's been a lot of questions about sort of exact measurements. And I loved Sharon's point of, you said it right at the beginning, symphony of nutrients. And I love that image that just appeared in my head when you said that. This isn't about, an exact science. It's about finding what works for you and using what you have in your home already. And yeah, I love all of that. I love making this way of eating so much more accessible. I think a lot of people so many people see it as restrictive, and to me it's the antithesis of restriction. It's just it opens up the world of possibilities.
Yes. I know scientists estimate there are 40,000 edible plant species on the planet. And then that's just species. And then within, like, just think tomatoes, how many thousands of varieties of tomatoes. So, it's when you're eating a plant-based diet, it's not eating less, it's eating more, because you have all of these beautiful varieties to choose from. And I was interviewing a chef for one of my articles I wrote, who's a chef who specializes in plant-based cooking. And he was saying, when you're a chef, it's like, the animal protein is like the brown lifeless thing on the plate. It's the plants that bring it to life. So when you think about the color and the textures and the aroma, it's the plants that really add life to the plate. And I was like, that's true, because you get all of these unusual textures that you can only get, think about a radish, that crunchiness with that little peppery bite, and those are true in the plant world. They just offer so much.
Absolutely.
Question.
Yeah.
In preparing the avocado, I think I missed whether you loosen the avocado before you fill it, or do you let the guest scoop it out with the avocado with the peel?
I just let them dig in, and they usually use a knife and fork, and but that's a good idea. I like that idea. You could just stick your spoon in there and loosen it, or you could even slice it. But I kind of like the idea of just serving it in its own little natural container. I love to do that cooking. I use all sorts of vegetables and to serve as a natural container. So that avocado skin is just this perfect little dish. But you could totally take a spoon and even score it so it's easier.
Yeah, okay, for the guests to get it out. Yeah.
But also one trick with avocados is they brown easily, they oxidize easily. So using a squirt of lemon juice is going to keep that green color nicer. So if you're having this, I would definitely squeeze a lemon over there to enhance the color so that it doesn't brown so quickly.
Thank you.
Good question and good tip.
All right. Do we have any more questions for Sharon or for us at Rooted? No, I'm gonna join Sharon here and just say what an absolute pleasure it was to finally have you teaching one of our classes. We've been wanting to have you with us for such a long time, and I know Beth is echoing my sentiment. So thank you so much, Sharon. We're really looking forward to your fourth book coming out. We're very excited about that. There's so much great work to be done in the diabetes community. We're doing work here with our local Diabetes Research Institute as well, and there's great stuff happening. So we're super excited to have more resource to share with the community as well. And as I said to everyone at the beginning, we did record tonight. We will get this out to you within the next 48 to 72 hours. I will include the links for the recipes as well. And also I noticed on Sharon, on your website, you have all of your books that you can buy and you can have them signed. But one of the things that I loved was that you actually have a package of the 3 books that comes in a really super cute, like farmer's market bag for $75, and you autograph it. And I was like, oh, that would just be such a perfect gift for somebody. So I encourage you all to go to sharonpalmer.com, check out all of her incredible web recipes, and her books are on there. And it's been a pleasure having you here. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. Great. What a great audience. I loved all your questions too.
Have a great night, everyone. Thank you. Thanks, Sharon.
Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye, everyone. Good night.